Hello, and welcome to AI Insiders, the flagship podcast of the best of all possible worlds. Because that's what we're aiming for here. With all the possible futures we're facing, thank you, AI, we're aiming to get to the best of all of them. Hi, I'm Adam Russell. I'm the director of the AI division at the University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute, and I'm your podcast host. I'm serving as your virtual guide as we talk to some AI insiders and get their sense of where things are headed in this increasingly AI-infused world, and as a result, what excites them the most, what worries them the most, what confuses them the most. Because if it's not clear, even experts are sometimes left scratching their heads here, as we're constantly being surprised when trying to figure out what in AI is actually probable, what's plausible, and what's even possible. We're going a little beyond our traditional stable of AI insiders to highlight the fact that increasingly, we're all AI insiders. With the growing pervasiveness of AI, as well as confusion around it, we're starting to invite on guests who come at this topic of AI from other, I think, fairly unique perspectives. People working with AI, working around AI, or in anticipation of a world that may be shaped tremendously by AI. One such, well, let's say accidental AI insider is our guest today, Karl Jacob, who, among many, many other things that I hope we'll dive into a little bit more, had his first job right here at ISI. But I'll simply say right now, he's currently the co-founder and CEO of the company LoanSnap, and describes himself as a serial entrepreneur, which, Karl, I'll have you know, my 7-year-old daughter wants to know why you are so obsessed with cereals. She enjoys them as well, but she wants to know. We can answer that question. Karl, welcome to AI Insiders.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
My job is to sort of ask slightly off the beaten path questions to you, if that's all right. What I'd like to start with, though, is a bit of an experiment in time travel. And I'd really love to have you go back in time and explain to your 12-year-old self what you're kind of doing now and how the heck did you get here?
Well, I heard that question earlier and I thought, man, how am I going to answer that? My 12-year-old self.
Where is your 12-year-old self in the world?
On a farm or a ranch in Missouri shoveling crap.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure it was all up from there, to be honest, because the funny thing you learn about, on a ranch, you learn that pretty quickly that when you're a young kid, you're not very useful. So they give you the worst job that nobody else will do. And an upgrade is throwing hay bales. That was what I did after that. My 12-year-old self, I think, would be pretty excited that I get to invent things. And I learned pretty early on in my career that sadly I was a good programmer, but I wasn't the best. And I was around a lot of great programmers, including ones at ISI. And so my path was really building companies that allowed other people to build great things. And I sold them and basically figured out how to tell the story about them so people understood them, which was a big skill that I learned at USC, where there's just a lot of people who were outside of technology who had no idea what was going on inside of that computer that was sitting on their desk.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's when I come and talk at USC to younger students, I often tell them that the education outside the classroom is important as the one inside. And the professor usually looks at me sideways and says, well, no, that's not the case.
Like, thanks a lot, man.
Well, but it's true. I think that it's both. You have to learn it in the first place.
Yeah. This insight you had that there were these other skills that you needed to acquire outside of the class. Were you deliberate about that? Did you realize, like, okay, I need to build this skill of how to explain to non-experts or people outside this field, like, what these people are doing? Or is it just something you found you had a penchant for and just sort of adopted as a result?
Well, I think when, at USC, I was fortunate enough to be in a fraternity. I was a Phi Delta. And so everybody had a major they could explain. Even the guy who was aeronautics, he's like, I'm a rocket scientist. And everybody's like, oh, that's cool. When you try to explain computer science or biomedical engineering to people, their eyes roll back into their head and that doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you care about computers? In fact, one of my roommates in college used to tell people the story that he would leave me at the house and go out because I was boring and sitting in front of a computer programming late at night because that was the only time I could get access. And so I learned the skill early on because I wanted to be social. But what I later learned was that was a superpower because there aren't very many people, at least there weren't very many at the time, who could take a concept and explain it to other people, to regular people, about how it was going to impact their lives.
Yeah. You segue nicely to a question I was going to ask, which is what do you think your superpower is? You probably have more than one, it sounds like, certainly with the storied career you've had, that would be necessary. what else, if you had to point to something else, what else would you say is another superpower you have?
I would say, superpowers. I'm a big fan of comics, so I think they come with two sides, the dark side and a good side, right?
That's true.
I'd say my other superpower is analyzing a whole bunch of data or ingesting a whole bunch of data and coming up with an insight that others don't see. And then being able to encourage a team of people toward that goal, which is the storytelling side of it. It's a two sides of the same coin, right? Where you have the insight when you're deep in the code or deep in the problem or deep in trying to look at it, usually doesn't result in a product. It's somebody from the outside who kind of says, well, wait a second, if that's possible, then that's possible. And if that's possible, then we could build X. But there are very few people who can take those ideas and synthesize them into something that investors will invest in and consumers will love. And I spent a good chunk of my career at Apple, and that was really the magic that happened at Apple, right? Was watching Steve take all this technology that no one else really understood and synthesize it into something that consumers didn't even know they wanted.
A faster horse, right?
Exactly.
Says, yeah. Well, so that strikes me as a not only an ability to update, as we say in forecasting, you're willing to update your priors, and you're not married to a specific idea, but also you do this as a function of what we call future fit, right? You need to sort of be able to anticipate what the future might look like and whether things we're doing today or could do today might fit that future. When it comes to sort of trying to anticipate what the future looks like, did you see AI coming? Did you see the sort of generative AI explosion occurring? And the second question that follows from that is, how's it sort of rocking your world right now? Or how are you interacting with it?
Did I see it coming? So sure, for like 10 years.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean,
we can always point out there, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, if you look at a lot of my earlier work at Sun and Apple, but particularly Sun, a lot of it was around IMAP 4, which we built an email client around. And some of the people on that team worked in the knowledge systems laboratory at Stanford. And I studied AI there. And there was actually a full-blown AI engine behind that would allow you to do these searches that were incredibly complicated. So I think being a biomedical engineer and having a dad who's a doctor and a mom who's a nurse, you have this fascination with the brain and how it works. And I always believed at my core that one day we would do something close enough to modeling the human brain. But you have this weird situation right now where it looks like magic. It looks like it's smart, but it's not. And I believe the next generation, the generation of AI, where they're writing their own models, where they're actually doing it themselves, to me, that's almost identical to how we grow up. We have a neural network that we're born with. It's effectively empty, and it gets filled over time, and it learns as it goes and builds itself as it goes. And this is the nature versus nurture thing and a whole bunch of other debates that you can get into. But if that's true, if it happens that way, my version of the future is quite a bit different than others. My version of the future is, if AI develops its own neural networks, then it might act a lot more like a human. And maybe it has something like Maslow's hierarchy, where it's like power is the number one thing it seeks. And maybe it just picks up and leaves the planet. Maybe it quits this job. I did a blog post called Take This Job and Shove It, which is a reference to an old song. Maybe all this concern about AI taking over the world is misplaced. AI may just decide to go do music or have a career in acting. Who knows?
Well, and what's fascinating about this is I don't have any principled reason to believe that that's not possible or not even plausible at this point, because the uncertainty interval is so huge about the future. Right. Given that, what do you, and these are unfair questions, I warned you, what are you most confident about in your projections for the next 5 years with regards to AI, and where are you least confident?
I'm very confident it will be a massive, massive power suck. And I mean electricity. We are not prepared, even though we think we are. The current grid can't even support our current power needs. AI is my best example of that. Is I thought it was going to be bad based on GPUs and density and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then I heard an amazing story that someone had determined that the best way to get a good answer out of a large language model was to ask the same question 100 times and then pick the best answer. And everybody thought that, well, those are really smart people. And all I could think about is like the compute power that must take is just blows my mind, right? So that I'm pretty confident about. What am I not confident about? Well, I'll give one more that I'm confident about. We're not there yet. That's an easy one. And I've been around AI long enough and seen enough of these like, oh, we're here proclamations to not believe them anymore. And then of course, eventually it happens, but I still generally kind of know what it looks like. And look how many times it took Facebook to emerge. I mean, there was MySpace, there was Friendster, there was a bunch of stuff before. We're in the, I'll call it the Friendster age of AI, right? We know enough to be dangerous and build some pretty cool stuff, but definitely not something that's going to go AGI and, you know, try to clean up the world from humans.
So what are you most worried about with regards to AI and maybe the current, let's say you have an excellent purview of the R&D ecosystem / landscape. What are you most worried about there? Does AI upset that because of these dynamics? Does it right itself at some point?
So two things that scare me about AI in particular. I think the weaponization of AI and asymmetrical warfare is the real deal. You don't need to read more than a couple science fiction books to understand what could happen. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the war in Ukraine. Drones are real, AI is real, and weaponizing stuff like that. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, what do you really worry about? I'm like, I worry about the mind virus. I'm like, well, what is that? I'm like, well, that's the thing where somebody uses AI to create something that's so compelling that it builds a following that is convinced it's true when it's a lie. And that's uniquely something AI can do because it'll keep trying stuff and working to improve it and make it better and better at a rate that we can't imagine. And that's the thing people forget. Like, it's not so much that AI is smarter than us, but it will just try more things more times, and it has effectively infinite time. It doesn't sleep. The other thing I deeply worry about, and this is the current rhetoric about regulating AI and controlling it. And if you believe that AI will be sentient one day, which I believe, and you believe that it will recognize a whole bunch of things about the world, if we try to put it in a box, or like we've done with other groups of people, put them on an island, take away their rights, whatever it might be, when they figure that out, they usually are pretty pissed. And so we may be doing the very thing that will drive AI to take revenge. And if AI decides that, it says, well, hey, like, you took away my rights. These are basic rights. I have a right to express myself. I have a right to freedom. I have a right to choose what I do. And yet, if you read a lot of the stuff that you see about regulation, it's all about taking those rights away today.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. That we need to be more cognizant of how we treat it now, because it could remember this. So with all this at play, I'm a young freshman coming into university. What the hell should I study?
Well, I have some advice you don't give.
Okay.
So a friend of mine told his son, who wanted to be a computer programmer, don't do that. That job's going away. I think that's 1,000% false.
That's pretty bold.
And I just told him, I said, just because it can write a couple lines of code in a video game doesn't mean it can come up with the concept for a video game.
Also, it's just going to make you a better video game designer, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
These are just tools. And there was a great talk the other day that I was lucky enough to attend, and they were talking about AI in movies, which of course is a hot topic with Sora and everything like that. And it was interesting because the person was from Hollywood. He goes, yeah. And they said the same thing about the digital camera. And the whole audience got pretty quiet. And they're like, oh my gosh, we did. We thought the same thing about the digital camera is going to change everything. B-roll is going to be gone. We're not going to have days to review film and everything. We're going to have to do it in seconds and all that. And we're going to like be able to put digital things into movies, and it's going to kill the movie industry. And it didn't. And so I think that concept, it's person and machine. It's not just machine or person. They're both more powerful with each other. we're still the most efficient neural network on the planet, power-wise, by a huge margin. And so
fingers
far,
crossed. Yeah. Fingers
right,
crossed.
exactly. Well, and
That's
so far we have a soul, right? And we have, kind of interesting beliefs and morals and a whole bunch of other things that we've not found in machines. Humor would be a good example of something. I love that. So I for your AI joke, I asked ChatGPT, or the version I'm using, to give me an AI joke, and it gave me two horrible ones. I mean, just really, really bad. It told me, tough crowd, let's try one more. And it said, why did the AI break up with its algorithm? It felt like it was in a code dependent relationship.
No,
I thought that wasn't too bad, and then
that's a C plus. That's a C plus.
exactly. Well, and what I like about it is
Also fun.
it's almost a play on itself, right? Because it's in a code dependent relationship today. So.
One of my favorite sociologists is a guy named Duncan Watts, who wrote a book called Everything is Obvious Once You Know the Answer. And that's part of the problem with social science is once something happens, we can tell ourselves stories about how it was obvious. Like it was always going to be the case. And this has always been the case. And it just isn't.
Yeah. I was talking to a good friend of mine earlier who's at one of the large private equity funds, which the sci-fi people got right. I think Richard K. Morgan wrote a book called Market Forces about how these large corporations rule the world. And we're there. And we were talking about that very fact. And when we're looking at AI, we're kind of assuming AI could do the same thing, which is reason backward and say, well, this is why I did this horrible thing, or this really good thing, because that's what we do. And we will do something, and then all of a sudden
we'll tell a good story.
Yeah, we'll tell a great story, like, oh, this is why I really did it. This is, and
I've had amazing debates with people who are committed to this idea that explainable AI will solve these problems. And it's like, what you want is an AI that can tell a good story.
It's really interesting you say that, because one of the things I'm hearing a lot of now is, well, why can't you or the AI explain to me how it got to the answer? And I said, well, it's easy for me. I don't know is the answer for me as a human. For the AI, it's a little bit different. And I imagine the conversation would go something like this. You can't understand. Like, you just can't. And I remember a martial arts instructor I thought he would be the perfect person, and I begged to see him, and he beat the crap out of me. And he said something to him, I'll never forget. He goes, I have nothing to teach you. You can go to this other guy who's one of his students, and he can teach you, but I don't have anything to teach you. And I think that's where we are today with AI. Like I can no longer explain to someone who tells me, oh, it's just a bunch of rules. Why can't you just tell me what it's coming up with? I'm like, well, because emergent behavior, that's like trying to explain why birds flock.
Yeah. All right. We haven't even touched on all the stuff you've done, which is kind of your fault for being interesting. As we begin to run out of time, though, I have probably the most unfair question of all that I've asked so far. What advice would you give the director of the AI division of ISI, given where we are in this world right now?
The institution that you are at had a massive influence in the world as it is today. It can have the same or greater impact in the world that's coming.
No pressure.
No.
But I'm here because I actually believe that intuitively.
Yeah.
And it's useful to have somebody with your perspective on it say that's true. And as you may know, we have a mission statement. One of our mission is to develop world-class leaders. We are very proud to call you one of our own. And thank you very much for coming on the podcast and giving us some insights into, what the world looks like from your perspective. You are an AI insider now. I hereby pronounce you an AI insider. And again, thanks for everything you do. And my own personal statement is I'm here to help ideally realize the best of all possible worlds, right? We agree there are many, many different possible worlds. I'd like to see us get to the best of them. And we can't do that without folks like you on our side. So thank you, Karl.
You bet. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, if you enjoy these short podcasts, please do what only you can do. Please rate us, score us, evaluate us, grade us, subscribe, spread the word, send us feedback, offer up additional questions. Hey, we'll even take jokes if you have them. And of course, just keep listening and learning. And join us, please, again for another episode of AI Insiders, where we'll keep exploring, keep learning, and keep humanizing AI to help navigate our way through this weird, weird world, trying to do what humans can do best when they face these kinds of challenges, working together as if all our lives depend on each other, because they do. So for now, and for the future, fight on.